We're recording now, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Gilbert. We'll go ahead and start this. I call this meeting to order of the Upper Rio Grande Flood Planning Group Subcommittee Task 4B, identification and evaluation of potential flood mitigation projects. The time is 1:13 p.m. on December 14th. I did want to mention that it might be a good idea to have a break halfway in between, maybe at the hour-and-a-half mark. I don't know if anyone has any problems with that or questions, or that would be a good idea since this is a long meeting.
I agree.
Yeah,
I don't think
we're
that'd
actually
be an issue.
hoping, sorry to interrupt, we're hoping it won't go the full 3 hours. So if we get to the hour-and-a-half point and it seems like we still have a long way to go, then yeah, we could take a break, but there's a good chance, we could get done within an hour to 2 hours.
Okay, sounds good. The first item, approval of the meeting minutes for November 15th. Anybody wants to make a motion to approve those?
So moved, Omar.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion approved. Minutes are approved. Item number 2, review of the meeting goals. And we turn that over to ACOM.
Yes.
ACOM, go ahead.
And if I can real quick, ACOM, before we do, after you make your presentation, I am going to just be asking specifically if any of these agenda items do require action or recommendation to the full group. So if you'll allow me to do that, just to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding what needs to happen. I know for sure 11 and 12 will take action, but there are some other items that may require the subcommittee to make a motion. So I'm just going to ask for that verification. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I guess I can go ahead and get started. I'll try to share my screen here 1 second. Or Jeff, do you want to share your screen? Since I think you're going to be taking us through the presentation. So first, we're just going to review the meeting goals. And like I said, Jeff is going to lead this presentation. We're going to review the TWDB FMP planning process. And we'll also discuss the screening for potentially feasible FMPs outside of the city of El Paso and El Paso County. We'll review the stormwater master plans for the city and the county and the process that we'll use to cut down the number of projects from the total number in each plan to the amount that we're going to evaluate. And then we'll go through the committee actions and talk about tentative future meeting dates. So the committee actions are going to involve voting on 3 of these agenda items. One will be the screening for potentially feasible regional FMPs outside of the city in El Paso, outside of the city and county of El Paso. So we'll vote on that overall process. We've refined it, or we'll be refining it in this meeting from what we talked about previously. And then we will talk about how we cut down the number of projects initially and from the city and county master plans. And we will vote on that process that we use to cut down the total number of projects. And then we will then vote on the projects that we select from those master plans to do the full evaluation for the regional flood plan. So that's what we're going to be voting on. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff.
So the meeting goals, it's basically saying the same thing that Chris just said. 3 things: define the screening process for non-El Paso County projects, screen the FMPs for the city of El Paso, and come up with a with a subset that we're going to be evaluating, and the same thing for the county. So let's talk about the FMP planning process first. So you all saw this flow diagram at the last meeting, but basically to take you through once and then show where we are in this particular meeting is we gathered a list of potential projects from all over the region. We've screened them, and if they have a negative impact, they don't get carried forward. If they don't have a negative impact, then you all screen them. And today what we're going to be doing is doing the screening process for non-El Paso or El Paso County FMPs, because we already did the screening we already developed the screening process in the last meeting for the city and the county projects. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at the city and the county projects, and we're going to create the potentially feasible projects for evaluation. These are the ones which we have the goal to be able to evaluate and get all the information that TWDB needs in order to score the projects. If the project is fully defined, and none of the projects are fully defined, they're defined at different levels, then we have to go through to score the projects. And we'll talk a bit about we have a certain limited amount of budget, so we can't deal with all 97 projects with the city or the all 69 projects for the county, for instance. And then once we score them, you all send them on to the state. Real quickly, I want to cover these three things. The planning group can submit a regional FMP with no negative impacts as a recommended FMP with full or partial scoring data for each. So even if we don't do the evaluation, if a project doesn't make it through the screening process today for evaluation, that doesn't mean we can't submit it as a recommended project. It'll just go in with partial scoring data, which means it'll have 0 points for all the categories that haven't been developed. The TWDB is going to score each project based upon the data that the planning group provides on each project to the state. And they've made it very clear how many points they award for different thresholds in each category. And then they're going to rank the project statewide to include a ranked list in the state floodplain. And Richard, we've been sending questions to you, but we're assuming that once projects get ranked in the state floodplain, that the state funding is going to be going in order of the priority in the plan.
Potential state future funding or financial assistance. Did I freeze? Or can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. May use the statewide ranking as a factor in prioritizing projects. But in no way is financial assistance going to be like going down the list.
So it's not basically the top one gets funded. It's basically a bunch of other prior factors, of which this one is one. But it definitely aids getting state funding to be highly ranked in the state plan.
It could boost that particular criteria for financial assistance. Yes.
All right, so going on to the planning process, I think this is basically the same process we just discussed before. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that when we're taking the 97 projects from the city down to some shorter number, we're not eliminating the other projects. We're basically saying we're not going to score those projects and make them more favorable to the state for potentially getting funding. So if the ones that we don't look at, the ones that we cut out today will be ones that will score as 0 in most of the categories that the state is considering in the ranking. So quick review of the schedule. I'm not going to read this slide, but basically we have to have the draft regional flood plan submitted by August of next year. And then there's almost a 2-year process of amendments before it actually gets completed in September of 2024. So state FMP scoring, basically, if in the flood infrastructure fund applications that were done earlier this year, there was a broad spectrum of data required for grant application. There was no regional pre-screening of those projects that were submitted to the state. Once the state flood plan goes out, then there will be this regional pre-screening, and there'll be a broader spectrum of data that's required for the grant application, or at least for the scoring by the state. So what are these scoring categories that are going to help the projects in terms of the state evaluation for funding? The two that I want to highlight here are the ones that require the most technical effort on the part of us, the consultant. And that is, we have to figure out for each project that's proposed to the state, what's the amount of flood risk reduced, and what's the amount of flood damage reduced. And then, of course, to get the cost, we have to get the cost of the project, which is part of its definition. So again, to state the meeting goals again, we're going to define the screening process for FMPs that are outside the county. And the ones that are within the county, we're going to look at the ones from the city of El Paso and say, which ones are we going to score as part of the draft regional flood plan? And for the El Paso County ones, we're going to look at them and say, which ones are we going to score for the draft regional flood plan? So any questions on the flood planning process, my little short digestion of this? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the screening methods for projects not in the city of El Paso and El Paso County stormwater master plans. We discussed this last time, but we never got through it and completed the screening process. So what's going to happen is today we'll agree on the screening process, and then the next meeting we have, we'll go ahead and decide which of those projects we're going to go ahead and carry forth as FMPs. But the review of what we did last time, we decided that the city of El Paso method of ranking for their projects was largely a qualitative process, which was appropriate for the screening that we're going to be doing as part of this phase of our planning. Later on, we're going to have to do a benefit cost analysis, which is a lot more technically complex. But that'll be done as part of the next phase, the scoring of the projects that make it through this screening. So we thought as an additional trial balloon, we just use the same categories and methods as the city. What are the projects we're going to have to screen with this? We're not going to have to screen very many projects. At this point, the IBWC projects are all going to go into the FME category. EPC, WID, new regulating reservoir, and also likely to be a set of improvements on Mesa Drain, which are in the county master plan, which in aggregate could be a project for the irrigation district. Then the Corps has a couple of projects, TxDOT has a couple of projects. And then from the survey, and I don't know if this has been updated, but from the last look at the survey, we had at least 5 relevant projects that we were going to be looking at as part of this screening.
Jeff,
Yeah,
the Keystone Seepage project, that one can be removed. We're already committed to funding and the course already working on that.
okay. Chris, can you note that one?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Giselle. All right, so last time we added 3 factors from the databases that were provided to us from the TWDB to the benefit categories that the city had. And we showed you figures last time that showed that the state has provided us spatial data that show where there are low water crossings in the floodplain, where there's vulnerable buildings in the floodplain, and when there's critical buildings in the floodplain. And that's all in existing TWDB data sets, so we can easily use those for screening of these projects. And then we can look at the projects and come up with some permit agency, what permits we think will be required for each of those particular projects. So one of the questions that was asked, I believe, by Levi last time was, how do these criteria compare to the goals that the regional flood planning group came up with in a different set of committee meetings? So we took those goals and we reviewed them, and this subset of 7 goals are goals that that are all covered by these factors that we selected from the city master plan. The one that's not is reducing maintenance. That doesn't show up in any of the goals. There are a slew of other goals that are in the plan, but they're largely not associated with projects, with the exception of down here under, if you all can see my my cursor, there's consider and incorporate nature-based practices and flood risk reduction projects and establish dual usage regional storage facilities for flood mitigation and water supply. Those are ones that are not considered in this particular set of criteria that we've set up. So let's go back to where we ended up last time. Was we had, so any questions about the criteria we've selected, screening criteria versus the goals? Do we look like we're okay, or do we want to make some changes? If I don't hear any protests, I'm going to move on with the list we've got. Okay, so, all right, so we need to use the same method that the city had. We have to assign some weighting points to each category. On the left here, we have the, let me pull this up for a second. On the left here, we have the points that the city attached for each category. The points really themselves don't matter. What matters is the relative value of the points for each category. Like, for instance, we're rating dam safety as 4. We're saying then that it's basically doubly as important as nuisance flooding. We want to be it's more important to the people who are evaluating the projects than nuisance flooding. All that have 4 are deemed to be equally important categories, and the ones that are 3 are in between. We don't yet have scores for these bottom 3 because we're taking those from the information that TWB has. So does anyone on the regional flood planning group want to make a initial trial balloon on how many points to attach to each one?
Hey, Jeff, I think the vulnerable buildings and the critical buildings should probably have a 4.
Okay,
I'm sure you want to equate them equal. Vulnerable buildings, critical buildings, I agree. Vulnerable buildings,
And
maybe less,
maybe a 3.
maybe a 3 or a 2. Yeah. Maybe a 3.
3, okay. Low water
Critical
crossings.
buildings. Very important, yeah.
Low water crossings.
You know, low water crossings is the only place we've had a death in the region. You know, I guess that's something to think about.
Well, you know, even these projects are going to reduce the frequency at which the low water crossings overtop, but they're certainly going to overtop in most floods, even after we do our projects, because our projects are targeted at the larger floods.
How do y'all feel about a 3?
Okay. So these other ones, do we want to just stick with the ones that the city came up with, or we want to change some of these?
That seems reasonable.
Those look fine to me.
All right.
You think? Think leaving the same?
Yes. Well, the one thing that I would like to prioritize is we make sure that we at least talk about those criteria that will actually be competitive in terms of securing funding. So whatever, we want to make sure that whatever the TWDB also prioritizes is, we at least talk about it. I'm not sure we want to have the same priorities, but I would hate to have a scoring mechanism that diverges so much from what the TWDB scoring criteria is that we would not, like, our selections are unfundable, or there's such a difference that those that get funded are actually not, that they're not correlating with those that we prioritize.
Right. I think that's a good point. I think where that's going to come into play primarily is in the next phase, where we actually are going to score the projects that make through this process. We're actually going to score them according to the, we're not going to score them. We're going to get the data, which TWDB can use to score for each of the projects that make it through this process. I think the ones that will not score high with the state are going to be pretty apparent when we go through that process.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make, is it going to be something where we have a scale, like for dam safety, it's either a dam safety issue or it isn't, right? So it's an all, right?
Right.
Flooding real property, that's really a range, I think, 1 to 4. Reduce flooding of IH10, that's a 1 to 4. I mean, some of them are going to be flood IH10 more often than others. Remove 100 plus properties from the flood zone, that's also a 1 to 4. Some are going to have 800, some are going to have 110, right?
Right.
So reduce the risk associated with debris flow, that's probably a 3. It's really difficult to differentiate. You're either on an arroyo or you're not, right?
Mhm.
Reduce flooding of major arterial roadways, that's also going to be a 1 to 4. Reduce maintenance. I think that's going to be a 1 to 4. Reduce nuisance flooding, that's probably just a 2. It either helps with the storm drains or it doesn't. And these are also 1 to 3. This is 1 to 3. These are 1 to 4. So really, we only have a couple that are all or none. So does this look reasonable to y'all? Chris,
It
do you have
does.
this down? Chris, do you have this down?
1 second, let me just, oh. Yeah, give me a
Do we
second
need-
here. Just taking a screen capture.
Yeah.
This would be,
Yep, I've got it.
I'm just going to make sure I have it here. Okay, then, so on this permit side,
Let me ask you a question. As
Okay.
we progress through, is there a spot where we need to make a motion for the group to accept what we've now put in place? If we need to, let us know.
that would be, I believe that would be agenda item 7 that says, adjust screen scoring of, oh, that's County of El Paso. Yeah,
this is, yes, we could make the motion now, or we could come back to this slide at the end, but this is one of the areas where we were going to approve the method.
that's the chair.
If I could get a motion to approve the screening method.
And this, and just for clarification, this is including the city and county of El Paso, not just the county.
It's just the screening method for projects not in the city of El Paso and El Paso County.
Not the city of El Paso, so that would be.
Not city or county, you said, right?
Not in the city of El Paso or El Paso County, but not as part of their stormwater master plans. For instance, there's an El Paso water project that is a recharge project on arroyos to basically recharge the groundwater. That one would count under this because it's not in the stormwater master plan. So it's not in the stormwater master plans is what matters. Makes sense?
So these are projects that have been identified that were not included as part of the stormwater master plan, but are still within the
Yes.
city or county of El Paso, right?
Right, yes. So for instance, the projects for the irrigation district are not in the plans, but they're going to be included they're going to be evaluated by this method. Does that make sense?
That makes
Okay, can
sense.
you give us a narrative of what the motion would state correctly?
Chris, you wrote out in the agenda what I thought was a nice phrase. It was in your.
So let
Right.
me ask you something. On this, the points, we said on the last one, reduce nuisance flooding, which it's 2 points. You either reduce it or you don't. But then if somebody scores removing 100 plus properties from the flood zone at a 1, that's gonna score less than the nuisance flooding, which is not really gonna help with removing anybody from the flood zone. So
Yeah,
I think
that's
we need to
good point.
we
That's
need
a
to
good-
really
we have
think
to-
about it, because then we're gonna be giving more a higher score to projects that don't really help in a regional matter, let's say, as with the scoring that we're doing here.
I think that's a good comment. Probably we should make sure that these things that are very important.
They're ranked higher.
They're ranked higher than nuisance.
Because
So
they
just,
provide a higher benefit, in the nuisance flooding projects, they still cost a lot of money and they don't provide a lot of benefit. They provide a lot of benefit to the area, but not to larger.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. So I think we these ones that are important, which are reducing flooding of real property, flooding of IH10, 100 plus properties, major arterial roadways. those will all just make their smallest one bigger than the nuisance flooding.
So I think that reduced flooding of I-10, that should just be kept at a 4.
Okay,
Because we always make the news if I-10 floods.
okay.
And Jeff, you
But-
have the RFPG points for the remove 100+ properties as 3 in the middle column. Should that be 4 in the middle column, or should we have them from 2 to 3 in the all or none?
Okay, it was 3 in the earlier ranking, but I think based upon Gisella's discussion, we should make that a 4. But in the
Which one did you change to 4?
This remove 100+ properties from the flood zone.
Oh,
The need
so
for-
then in all or none, it's a 3 to 4?
Yeah, I think the reason why it was a 3 before was it was a boost to the reduced flooding of real property. So if you reduced flooding of real property, you got a 4, but if you got over 100 properties, then you got an additional 3 points. That's the way I think it worked. So you always got the reduced flooding of real property, and then this was a boost. So I think that's why we did the 3 here.
Okay.
So I think that
Okay.
makes sense. Make that a 1.
Let me go down the list and make sure I have what we just did now. Dam safety, all or none is 4. And if I make a mistake, tell me. Reduce flooding of real property, 3 to 4.
Yeah,
Reduce flooding I-10, 4.
yeah.
Remove 100+ properties, 3 to 4.
No, we're now making that 1 to 4 on the, and we need to make a note that the 100+ properties get scored with the reduced flooding of real property. So, basically it's, you could either get, for flooding, you could either get 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 points, all of which will be much bigger than the nuisance, right?
Okay, let me continue. Reduce risk associated with debris flow, 3.
Yeah,
Reduce flooding of major arterial roadways, 3 to 4.
yeah.
Reduce maintenance, 3 to 4.
We
Reduce
made it
nuisance
1 to 4 on maintenance because it's your all's choice, obviously, but I would think maintenance could be less important than nuisance flooding in some circumstances. Although
Okay. Nuisance flooding, 2. Low water crossings, 1 to 3.
Yeah,
Vulnerable buildings, 1 to 3, and critical buildings, 1 to 4.
And Jeff,
Okay.
sorry, I'm still a little unclear. If you could scroll back up to the reduce properties, remove 100+ properties from the flood zone. You have the RFPG points as 3, but then it's 1 to 4. Should that be 1 to 3? Or
thank you. Thank you. Good catch.
Wait a minute,
3 and
but see, the thing is that not all projects remove properties from the flood zone. So if it's a project that'll remove more than 100 properties from the flood zone, I think it needs to be paid special attention to, because that's 100+ properties, more properties that will be saving on flood insurance.
Right. So they're going to have before anybody gets any of this 100+ properties from the flood zone, they're already going to have 4 points under the reduced flooding of real property. They're already going to have 4. So it's just an add-on. So it enables you to basically jack up the flood score from 4 to 7.
Okay, so I guess, what do you consider real property?
Well, it includes the structures in addition to the, basic properties. But it's primarily oriented towards, it's your all's definition, but in the discussions we had in doing the flood plan, it was basically, did it have a significant impact on property or not? And if it had over 100 residences, 100 properties, then we gave it bonus points. So let's say it gets, 20, 30 houses, it's going to get 4 points, but if it gets 100 houses, then it's going to get, more. And if it has 800 houses, it's going to get 3 more. That has the effect, that gives the flooding a pretty heavy weight in in the evaluation.
So I guess if we need to consider when are we gonna issue 1, 2, or 3 points that would need to be depicted there. Otherwise, we're just
It'll
gonna.
be y'all.
Yeah, I think those are parameters. If it's so many properties, it's a 1. If so many properties, a 2, or higher than so many properties, it'll be a 3.
I think we can do this based upon judgment when we get into this process. Remember, this process is only going to be applied to a limited number of projects, right? We're only going to process this to these projects.
Right, but what I've learned is that your judgment may not be the same as my judgment. So why leave it up to interpretation? You know, so because there'll be in here with us, I mean, we can talk about it and everything, but once the plan's put out, if it's affecting, I guess somebody's reviewing it and they feel affected by it, then they can come back and say something about it.
I think what we're doing here is we're selecting projects which we're going to do an evaluation for. When we do the evaluation, we're going to know exactly which houses are being impacted. And so, and they will, when they get to, those numbers of structures that are impacted before and after the project, all that's going to go to the state. And that's a pretty level playing field because of the way the state set up these scorings, right? I think what we want to make sure is that we don't miss a project that's got significant impact. I think since you're only evaluating on the order of, maybe 10 projects with this method, I think clearly anything that impacts over 100 projects is probably going to be carried forth to evaluation, right? But that's your choice. But I think we don't need to do a lot of detailed criteria for this, because it's going to be a fairly qualitative discussion on those 10 projects, which is why we're using this particular scoring method. But I think it's going to be clear once we look at the project whether it's impacting a significant population or not.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say.
And just to clarify, when we're talking about real property, you said that's property with buildings on it, but so like, for example, agricultural property would not be part of that, right?
Well, remember this scoring method, that's a good point. This particular scoring method was derived from the city of El Paso. Right, so we didn't have an awful lot of agricultural property that we were trying to protect. So we could make it clear that real property includes agricultural production lands. Does that make sense to everybody? We include that as a potential scoring item.
I think that sounds very reasonable. Land is real property. It's taxable, so it's real property too.
Right. So I think we just expand the definition which I gave of being impacting buildings, that it also impacts agricultural lands.
Well, or even land that's not agriculture. Any land that's owned by somebody is real property. And
okay,
so
that sounds
yeah,
good.
when you say real property, let's just make sure real property includes land.
Right, I agree. Let's do it.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
then it's pretty much,
agricultural.
yeah, so it's pretty much just reducing flooding, period.
Yeah, but at least we have some range of scores here, 3 to 4. I think if these projects were defined to address some problem in this plan, and all these projects that we've included that we're screening are all designed to address flooding. So this this reduced flooding of real property is not going to be a real differentiator between all these projects. These other ones are going to be the differentiators.
So I guess right there, just be reduced flooding of property, period.
Okay. You're right, because real has a definition that we want to avoid potentially. Chris, you get that change?
Yep.
Okay, and then we have all these permits, which are basically the same permits which were discussed on the city properties, and every time they impacted a project and made them less easily developed, then there was an adjustment to the score. And we're thinking about keeping the same ranking factors that we had before.
Jeff, sorry, are you able to expand so we can see the last row on that table on the left?
I can't, well. Okay.
Thanks.
Did you come up with that language, Chris?
Which language?
The language that was in the agenda for the bottom two agenda items for the vote. Annette asked for the voting language.
Yeah,
I
if you scroll to the bottom of this presentation, it's one of those last slides in this presentation. That 130, yeah. So it's refinement of the screening method for selection of potentially feasible regional FMPs from stakeholders other than the city of El Paso or El Paso Water and El Paso County.
Okay.
Chris, that's the only thing that I wanted to verify with you all is if like that wording is not on our agenda. So that's why I was trying to make sense of what needs action and what didn't. So I would just recommend maybe at this point, if you do the presentation, we get to the end, and whoever makes the motion for 11 and 12 makes a notation that they approve or they make a motion to include all of the items that has been presented with modifications. So that way everything can be captured. And I think that might be an easier way for us to do it then.
Okay. Chris, Chris, can you develop that language before we get to the end of the presentation? Then we'll just vote at that time, right?
Sure.
Okay. So we'll make the motion to approve this particular scheme when we get to the last slide of the meeting. So let's go on to the next one. So screening the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan FMPs. So we've already discussed how they did the scoring, and we approved that. You all approved that scoring method that we use in terms of screening their projects. We would stick with the same scoring method, with one exception, and that is Gisela said that she wanted to make sure that the screening included community disruption. And so we were going to add community disruption. I just wanted to, in looking at what was considered before, we did consider street utility and amenities reconstruction, and we assigned a number to that one, whether it was complex or difficult. Does that address what you were trying to get us to do, or do you want us to do a separate evaluation for community disruption?
No, I think we need to get a separate evaluation.
Okay.
So for instance, if we're gonna install huge systems in a residential street, and the construction is gonna last months and months, then that's something that we need to consider.
But isn't that considered? in the street utility amenities reconstruction, or did we think that was something different when we scored these?
Well, yeah, that was more dealing with the permit
The
complexity.
permit stuff. Okay, all right,
Yeah, that was with the permits.
all right. On to the next. So we'll have a step in here to adjust the scores, adding that factor when we get to step 4 on here. So in order to try to reduce the length of this particular meeting, AECOM had a meeting with the city earlier this week to basically get the city's input on whether they felt all 97 of the projects should be considered as part of this screening. And in the discussion with them, we basically reduced the 96 projects down to 25. And I wanted to go through that. So we're starting with 25 projects instead of 97. So I sent out an email on Friday, and it was again sent out early Monday morning, that explained the process that we use in order to do this. So if you all have any objections to the way that was done, please bring that up as we go through this, and we can rethink how we did this reduction. We also provided with with that documentation, we provided maps which showed the projects which were retained, the 25 projects that were retained, and in the context of the full 96 projects. So you all have in that email the projects that we're going to keep. So for instance, we're going to go through all these steps, but for instance, in the central part of El Paso, about half the projects were retained because of their priority, and then this affecting IH10 and affecting large numbers of structures. In other portions of the city, there were a lesser percentage of the projects that made it into the top 25. But you have all these from the data that you were sent on both Friday and Monday.
What's the differentiation between the yellow and white?
I'm sorry. Good question. I thought the yellow were the ones that are in the final 25, and the white ones are the ones that were screened out from that top 25. And again, I want to emphasize that we're not saying the ones that are in white will not be in the regional plan. They can be in the regional plan. That's your choice. They're just not going to be scored to the full extent that the TWDB has requested. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I have to ask, you said you interacted with the city to determine these. Who was the city, who in the city did that?
It was Gisela Dagnino, who's on this call, and other members of the EPW staff were involved in that discussion.
Okay.
So let me go through how this was done. I'll do it very quickly, but I want to run through it. You were sent a spreadsheet. And what we have here is we have a spreadsheet that includes the 96 projects as they were originally ranked by EPW in the process in creating the plan. And it has a list of the total points that for each project that were added up based upon this method that we just discussed. So basically, this project, the top one had 17 points in terms of benefits, and it didn't involve complex permitting, so it made it to the top. So the first cut was in the discussion with the city. It was which of these projects are the ones that we want to make sure we keep in it because of impacting a lot of structures. So we wanted to make sure that every project that removed 100+ properties from the floodplain were included in this short list. So it turns out that the lowest ranked project that took 100+ properties out of the floodplain had a score of 7. So we made a cutoff at 7 and said that we would not be scoring these projects below with 6 points and below as part of the regional flood plan. That cut us back to 39 projects. Does that make sense? So we're keeping all the projects 7 and above in the first culling. The second thing we did is we looked at them, and this was in discussions with EPW, and we identified the projects that were on path to other funding. Like if a project was already going to have a cost benefit analysis as part of a separate funding process, we didn't want to take regional flood plan assets to do a competing cost benefit analysis of that project. That one's already on the track to give us the information that's needed. Does that make sense? So EPW went through and identified the projects that are already in process getting the information that's needed for the plan in a different route than the regional flood plan route. That cut out another 14 projects or so, and left us with a total of 25 projects that were to be approved to be carried through for the to be evaluated as part of this particular plan. That would be scored, and they'd be scored within the assets of the plan, as many of them as we could get to.
So that's a tough one, because some of these we already have in our CIP. So we really, how long is this going? How long is this going to take to get studied and applied for funding, et cetera, et cetera? I said for the 3 years, we have to wait the 3 years, or so that's hard, because this list, I know we said, okay, let's cut it off here and so on and so forth, but maybe by the time it gets around to funding, we're already working on it.
I think at any time that you decide that it's in the category like we had in step 2, where we already have the money for it, we don't go for it.
So then do we move other projects to replace that one that we removed, or?
That's up to the regional flood planning group, right? So there's your project, there's the projects for the city, there's the projects for the county, and there are these projects from outside the county. And what we're deciding today is which of the city projects and which of the county projects we're going to carry forth into scoring. And these 25 projects that we're thinking about carrying forward are ones that are not, per the earlier discussions, are not ones that are already being scored. So they would go into the hopper of the projects that we would score as part of this flood planning process. In the event that you don't need the scoring done, then it would, if you don't need the scoring done for CE5A, for instance, because you think that's going to be the design for that, or the information that's needed to develop a score for that is going to happen quicker than the flood planning process, then we won't expend regional flood planning group assets developing that score.
So that's one of the problems that I have, because yeah, we did meet for, I think it was what, half an hour, because I had to jump to another meeting, and so we have the list, but really I haven't been able to sit down and really go through it. So these are big decisions that we're making to not really be able to sit down and go through the projects.
Okay,
That's in my case, and I know we have a deadline, but it's we're doing a lot of things in a haste, and that's my feeling. I don't know if others feel the same.
So I think, let me try to make this a little bit less, make it seem a little bit less like we're making hard and fast decisions that are going to doom projects in the future. That's not what we're doing. Remember, every one of these, none of these projects are being eliminated from being considered, right? So
Right.
all these projects are potentially, per the regional flood planning group, could be continued and listed in the plan. What we're doing today is we're trying to figure out which of the projects we need to score and have them prioritized so that we start scoring, because that's what we need to do in order to keep on plan. We have to start looking at these projects and getting what effect they have on the floodplain so we can score them, right?
Right, but but I and that's my feeling. I still think that, okay, now we're going through this list, and it's just the projects here within the city, but I'm sure the county has other projects. I'm sure the other counties have other projects as well. So it's like we have these, okay, now we're looking at it. I think we're getting a better grasp of what's going on, because I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way.
You're the important one in terms of these particular projects, right?
Right. So that's why, a 30-minute meeting that we had, or an hour meeting that we had, it's not enough time to really submit the projects that need to be scored, or that need to be evaluated based, or coming up with whatever scoring we need to do now. Right. So I just don't want us to waste time on projects that may not even need to be here. And we have this list, and we have it by priority, we have it by ranked, but still, this this is an older list, so we have to adjust it.
All right. So how about this as a proposal? What we have is, we have a certain, what we can accomplish today is cutting the list back. We're not going to be able to evaluate 25 projects. We don't have enough budget within the regional floodplain, right? Mm-hmm. So unless you're nervous that we don't have the ones that you really want within this 25, I think by keeping it a big number at 25, there's likely to be, the project you want is going to be somewhere within the top 10, the ones that you want.
So the thing would be like, how many projects can we evaluate? That way we don't just throw random projects in there.
Right, so what I'm thinking is gonna happen is we reduce, we asked the regional flood, we asked the committee here, which includes everybody in addition to the city, whether they like this 25 or they want to cut that back now to some lesser amount, right? But the ones that would ever make it through this meeting, we will, by the next meeting, come up with some estimate of how many of these we can do
Okay.
within our budget, right?
And I see what you're saying, but what do we base the number on? What's a good number? And based on what? You know, that could be for City of El Paso, for County of El Paso, for Valverde, for any other of the counties here. What's the magic number and how do we derive to that magic number?
So the way we're doing it is by this scoring method that we're developing and all agreeing, right? That's how we're, in terms of this, through this screening process, we're developing these points per project. We've already done these for the city projects, which is why we're not starting from scratch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking advantage of the previous work that the EPW has already done, and we're keeping the ranking that you all have been content with, and we're carrying that ranking forward. But I get that you all want to make sure that we expend money scoring the projects on the projects that you think you don't want to spend the money on scoring on a project that you think is going to get worked on anyway.
Right.
Which
We
is-
want to spend our resources wisely. We don't just want to throw projects in there and then waste money when it didn't need to be done.
Good
And
point.
no, that's for the entire region because we're here to represent the entire region, not just our section, not just our county, not just our region, our area.
All right, so that was the purpose of the second step. The purpose of the second step was to try to take out the projects that you think that the city thought we didn't need to study because they were going to be studied anyway, right? If you think that you need more time to make that decision before we make this cut, we can. It's up to the regional flood, the subcommittee, but we could delay doing this until next month to basically refine this step 2 if you want to take more of them out of here to make sure that the ones that we choose are the ones you want to have chosen. Or at least in the order before it goes to this group. Is that what the subcommittee would like to do? Would you like to table this one until next meeting? And Chris, you're going to have to talk about schedule on that if we do that. I think we're okay on schedule because we were able to do the other projects. The reason for trying to get through the city and county ones on this in this meeting would be that we'd be able to get started on some projects and make progress towards the next deliverable. We're not going to make progress on the city deliverable until we make a decision.
This is Dave. When do you expect to begin the evaluation process?
We were going to begin if we could get this list reduced for the city and the county, we would then at the next meeting be able to evaluate our budget versus the list that you all have selected that you want to have scored, right? So we would say we think within our available budget we can handle these number of projects, and then if you all agreed with that with the with those projects, we could at least get started on the highest priority ones immediately at the next meeting. So we'd be able to get started on work on these projects in the beginning of January.
Gisela, here's a suggestion. It's just a thought. If we allow the 25 to go as they are today and approve them as of now, and you have the prerogative at the next meeting to make an adjustment on the list, would that work for you? Because it would give you more time to take a look at it?
That would work for me. That way they can get started on other projects that need to be evaluated with the county and anybody else, the county of El Paso and other counties, and then I can provide a revised list.
Okay, if that'll work for you, then we can agree on the 25 that are up there for now.
Is that a valid suggestion, Annette or
Well,
Richard?
We have to, we still have the issue of, we need to add that one factor that Gisela was mentioning and rescore them all.
Okay, I guess I'm a little concerned in relation to the list about some of the items that ranked really high at the end of the evaluation, the first, 6 or 8 columns, and yet had huge amounts of permitting issues, which could ultimately change as you move down the road and those permits get approved. The assumption is those were high priority items or activities, yet the permitting is putting them way down on the list. And I don't know if those should be, I hate to have items that were listed really high but have permitting issues dropped off the list or way down in the low priority and not ultimately be considered.
So, Dave, that's a good question. But this particular set of rankings was developed in a public process by EPW with a lot of people in the room. And there are people from different constituencies, different, around the county. And this is the scoring method that they approved. And they felt that the constructability of it was a big issue, and they didn't want projects that would have to go through a long permitting process to be in the initial slug of projects that were to be approved. There was obviously a lot less money than there was projects to develop, and that group in this public process decided on this particular method of scoring. And what you're describing is one of the results of that set of priorities that they set.
I understand.
Yeah,
I understand that. It just seems to me that permitting is taking a huge impact on some of these projects that seem to be pretty important.
and I think we left out, we've always left out the option. I think we put that in our last set of discussions, that we could manually with flood planning group approval move projects up. If you, Dave, or if Carlos or anybody who had a particular reason for thinking that a project was important, that project could be voted on and brought forward. It's just the scoring method was approved and the prioritization method was approved with that particular exception allowed.
Yeah, I understand. I just had to make that comment. I feel better now.
This is complicated. We spent a year on the master plan, right? And a lot of public meetings and so on to get the master plan put together. And it's difficult to reconstruct all the evaluations that were done in that plan. We obviously can't reevaluate all the projects to the same extent it was done in that plan. So the
So
shortcut,
Giselle, are you happy with carrying the 25 forward based on what I said earlier?
Yes, as long as I can go back in and resubmit a revised list, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
you
Does that help us get past this part of the process here?
it does if we the next thing we were going to do was to add this this factor of disruption. I think is it still important for us to add this factor for disruption and rescore all the projects?
No, I don't think it's important. We no, we don't need to include it.
All right. So we have out of this process, step 3 of these 25 projects. So are we at the point where we can recommend these 25 projects with the qualification that Dave just said? We'll do that at the end of the meeting with the language that Chris is going to develop. Chris, you got that assignment?
Yep, I'm working on it, and I will just say, Isela, whenever you are evaluating, which of the projects that are being studied by others we might exclude to save some of the budget or funding for the regional flood plan, just keep in mind when those studies by others might be completed, because we are submitting the draft of this plan to the RFPG for review in July. And so, ideally it would be good if those studies were being completed in the May timeframe, let's say, at the latest. Otherwise, those scores or evaluations done by those others, they're not going to be incorporated into the scores that will be developed from the regional flood plan. They'll get scored as zeros or blanks. So the timing of when those studies get completed are important to consider.
So anything completed after, it's better to include them or to not include them? Anything completed after May timeframe? Any studies?
I don't think, again, there's nothing that precludes you from submitting for TWDB funding for any project that you have in the hopper, right? And so it's just a matter of, and as Richard explained, it's not a fatal flaw if you don't score highly on the regional floodplain itself. There's other considerations which, if the community has a strong enough reason based upon information that comes out that misses the plan, then the TWDB is going to be able to consider that and rank it. Am I saying that correctly, Richard?
Yes, you are. And just emphasizing that there are funding programs that I believe Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds, one of them, I believe, can fund certain stormwater projects currently. And if there is potential another opening for the Flood Infrastructure Fund, projects can be, up until when the state flood plan is adopted, any projects can be funded through those currently.
And Richard, I had a follow-up question. If a project gets into the regional flood plan as an FME, and then after the flood plan is drafted, somebody else completes that FME, and there's enough information for it to be funded for construction as an FMP, is that still possible because it will be in the plan, even if it's only in there as an FME?
Likely will, once that information comes out of the FME to be able to get enough project details, the region will likely need to do a plan amendment just to update it to moving it over to an FMP.
Okay.
All right. So it's almost 3:30, everybody. So do we want to take a break? I think we probably can get through the county in a half an hour to 45 minutes. Do we want to proceed or do we want to take a 5-minute break? I'll pass it back to Annette to decide that.
I
5
say
minutes.
proceed.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Eric,
sorry.
No, I think we should take a
Us
5-minute
us
break.
old guys need a bathroom break.
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.
All right, 5-minute break. And I'm one of those old guys, so I'm going to take a break.
And no more than 5 minutes now.
Okay.
Political breaks usually end up being 20 when you say 5 or 30 when they say 10.
All right, well, it's 3:28. I'll be back on here at 3:33. The thing I'm Yeah.
We're at 33, Jeff.
All right. So do we have a quorum again? Do we have everybody?
Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, we're good.
Okay, so the bit we've yet to do here is the similar screening to the city of the county projects. And the county projects were 67 at the start, and we're going to try to sort them down to a smaller amount that we can then work off of a shorter prioritized list and getting them scored for the state plan. So I'm going to run through very quickly the prioritization that was done on the county projects. This is the map of the county with all the projects that were identified. And then we're going to go into how we went from 67 down to 20. And we had a meeting, just like we had with the city. We had a similar meeting with the county, and the county engineer was at that meeting, providing input on how to do this and whether the method met the county's approval. So let's go through quickly what the county method is. So the county method had a 2-stage prioritization. Stage 1 was very similar to the method that was used by the city. They basically had a set of factors which they then scored, and they came up with a total. And then for each project, they did a benefit cost ratio, just like we have to do for the projects under this plan. And then they sorted the projects by benefit cost ratio to come up with their total. So this is what they ended up with. They divided they scored each of the projects according to those factors, and they varied from fairly low score up to a maximum score of 22. And then they decided that they defined one tier as 14 points and above, one tier as 10 to 13, and then the remainder, and then they sorted within the remainder by BCA. So as you look at each one of these tiers, the benefit cost ratio, the ones in the top of each tier are the ones with the highest benefit cost ratio. It looks like the benefit cost ratios are less than 1, but the benefits that were included in the BCR for the county projects did not include, for instance, road repairs. It was primarily associated with damages to structures. So there are other categories of flood damages that are not in this particular assessment of damages. And when the county went into the state for to compete for the FIF funding, they added in the benefits for the ones that were not considered in the plan, and these BCRs went up some. So this is the way we started out with the ranking. We had a meeting with the county, and we went through this particular process, and I'm going to go through it step by step on what the county did. So the county, we started out with the full list of 69 projects, and then we sorted the projects according to the number of residences that were taken out of the floodplain by the project. And so all the ones that took 100 residents or more out, the county chose that cutoff. Those were by default selected. They wanted to make sure that those stayed in the list. Then we did the same thing with the acres of ag land. So we took the previous list and we sorted it by acres of ag land. And they wanted, there's a clear break between 80 acres and the next one down. So they wanted included in their list all the projects that included helping 80 acres or more of property. Slow me down if I'm going too fast. All right, so the third cut was if it impacted a critical route, it was sorted. And then sorted by critical route and the BCR. So if it had a critical route, it was up at the top of the list. And then we also sorted all these projects by the BCR. And you can see that the BCRs, these ones that are these individual crossings were projects that were helpful, but which did not have sufficient benefits to score a significant BCR. So they weren't included. And the county said, well, because of the fact that if you add in the other benefits, there was a chance that these benefits the BCR could go above 1. They said, let's make sure we include these projects that have substantive benefits. Let's get them in, and they prevent blocking of a critical route. They add those to the list. Does that make sense? Right. The next thing was they, just to make a cutoff, they cut off the remaining projects that had 10 points or less. But they kept in the list any of the projects that had already been identified as being selected already. So for instance, in the projects below 10 and below, there were 2 projects that had high numbers of acreages of ag land that were kept. And there was 1 project that had a relatively high BCR that protected a critical route. So those 3 stayed in, but all the other projects below 10 were eliminated. Is this making sense? All right, so all the orange lines get removed and we end up with a condensed list from the 67 down to this particular list. And then 2 of the projects have been funded by the FIF. And so they're taken from the list.
Hey, Jeff, can I interject real quick?
Yep.
I know Gilbert Saldana is not on the phone, but I believe SOC 1 and SOC 2 they've also been invited to fund that one, and that just came recently.
Since our meeting we had this week?
Yes, sir.
Does that mean that they have?
There's a potential they'll be funded, but it's not a guarantee.
Well,
at this point.
they've been invited to submit the application for funding.
So the way the county left it, they wanted SOC 1 and SOC 2 left in this list. We can always take it out later if they don't want it in the list. Let's see. So when we got to step 6 and we sorted it by BCR, the SOC 1 and 2 came out at the top. Yes, so we need to figure out whether the county wants SOC 1 and SOC 2 because it would be the first one that we would score.
Right, and like I said, they did get a letter for invitation, so
So let me ask you, if it's a project that's potentially funded, does that stay on the list or does it get removed?
If it's potentially funded, that's different than being funded. So I think it's up to the plan. It's not my decision. I mean, it's your all's decision. The question is, do we, right now, what you're saying is that we would do the scoring of this. This would likely be one of the projects that we would expend planned funds on to get scored. And it's, you know, I think we have to be talking to the county on that issue. So I think if we decide to do this list, to carry it forward into the next, carry it forward for potential scoring with the flood planning group's assets, I think we'd have to have a qualification asking the county at the next meeting whether that's something that's productive or not. But it's up to them, I think, or up to you all.
So once somebody's invited to submit an application on a project, more than likely they'll get funded, right? Because they've already been asked to submit.
Yes.
More than likely, yes. They've been screened, they've gone through the priority list, and the funding is there to fund that project.
So then I don't think we should spend money on going through the efforts if it's already going to be funded.
Right.
But
so,
yeah, but let's talk to Gil just so that he can you know, verify that or he can confirm that he already received the invitation.
All right, so we've taken, this list is now sorted by BCR, right? So the ones that would likely be scored by the region would be these ones up top. If we take out SOC 1 and 2, then we're dealing with a couple of them with relatively high BCRs before adding in these added damages, and then there's a whole slew of them that are not likely to score very high on BCR. So do we want to take, we currently have 20 projects, we're taking out one, so 19 projects. Do we want to take 19 of these projects and potentially score them? Knowing that once we look at our assets, we're probably going to score some subset of this, but we could carry forward into having us evaluate what it would take to do these. Do you want to carry forward the 19 or some subset of the 19?
I think we should carry forward the 19 because, you know, on what grounds are we going to reduce that number?
Okay.
Now, we also have to look at the other counties, the projects that they have.
Right, and that's what we did at the beginning of the meeting is we came up with the screening method for those projects, which would be different than this screening method.
Right.
But similar.
Do you already have those projects that they're going to be moving forward with or not yet?
So the projects we have, let's go forward. These are the projects we know about as of this meeting. Remember, we sent out a survey, and one of the questions in the survey is, what projects do you have? We're not aware of I know this regulating reservoir has had some concept design done on it and costs, right? I don't know where we are in Rio Bosque. Do you know?
I think the course funding the design, but that's it.
but there's at least 2 relevant projects from TxDOT, and there's 5 relevant projects from around the region. It's not clear what stage they are in their concept design. We can't evaluate them unless they already have something like the master plans have, where you have a concept design and some cost associated with them. If they don't have that, they're going to end up being an FME instead of an FMP. It's not clear how many of these are going to be evaluated, but we also don't know whether sometime in the process we're going to get from one of these entities enough information to score them. But
So we have 9 projects from outside city and county.
9. Well, we have to take out Keystone Dam because Ella just told us about that.
I
So
counted 5, 2,
yeah,
1 and 1.
9, right. We currently have 9.
And I think it's really important from the point of view of equality and making sure that the rural folks understand that we're paying attention to what's out there, that we evaluate as many of these as we can within the budget allocations.
So what we're going to do, we'll take the information we have for each of these, and it's not going to be extensive, but we've chosen a evaluation method that that allows us at least to assign some qualitative factors to each of the projects. And we'll do that in a meeting, preferably next meeting. And I think the consideration you just said, Dave, will weigh into whether you let these go ahead and get scored or not. But at least you will have gone through the process of at least looking at what these projects are and what the likely populations and property at risk are.
So Jeff, so we're representing 23 counties and 30 municipalities, and we only got 5 projects from outside from the city and county of El Paso?
Correct. So, but we've had people calling up the floodplain administrators. It's not, we have not been passive on this. Chris, you want to discuss this?
Yeah, so we have a list of FMEs and FMSs as well that a lot of the studies and projects that we came across fell into those categories rather than FMPs, because as we were mentioning, the FMPs have to have a certain level of design already completed. Typically, if it had less than a 30% level of design, it would probably fall into the FME category. But there weren't really detailed stormwater master plans in any of the cities. There were some hazard mitigation plans, but a lot of those had kind of more soft goals and not actual designs completed of projects that have parameters that could be potentially funded for construction.
So I think
we are still in the process of coordinating with some of these stakeholders, so there could be more added to this list. I know that TxDOT just got us some information recently on some studies in the region and some projects, so we're going through those. There could be a lot more TxDOT projects that get added to that list. So yeah, this isn't set in stone at this point. This is just where we are right now.
Right. So it was important to set the screening process for those as they come in, so that all of those get evaluated according to the same yardstick. So, so back to my spreadsheet with the 19 projects, we're going to take out SOC 1 and 2 based upon the discussion. Do we want to discuss this anymore, or are we thinking we're going to go ahead with the 19 out of the 67?
I think the SOC 1 and 2 just we'll just need a confirmation from Gil that they did receive the invitation to submit. So just an email. Would an email suffice or something of that sort?
Yes.
So you can reach out to him just so we can have it in writing.
So given that, we're off to our three votes. So Chris, can you?
Yeah. So I can either share my screen or you can add the text.
Why don't you
share?
Yeah, you share. I think you share if you've written it.
Okay. Okay. So it's a little bit wordy, but I tried to capture what we discussed here. The first action to vote would be refinement of the screening process for selection of potentially feasible regional FMPs for projects not included in the City of El Paso or El Paso Water Stormwater Master Plan and the El Paso County Stormwater Master Plan, including all process refinements discussed during the subcommittee meeting held today, 12/14/21.
Can you say approval of refinement? That's what they're voting on, right?
So are there any questions about this wording or anything to add?
Through the chair, if I can just confirm with AECom, are any of these agenda items capturing the ranking of the County of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan FMPs per adjusted scoring?
Yeah, that would be the second one.
Like a number
Okay.
2 issue.
No, it's number 3 is the county.
Oh, sorry, the county would be the third one. Yeah, the city is the second.
Okay, and then if I can I'll keep going. Adjust the screening scoring of County of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan FMPs per previous committee consensus method?
Right, that would be
City.
this one right here. You're talking about, you just said county, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking, I thought COEP meant county, so I guess City of El Paso, yes, I'm sorry.
Right, that would be the second item here.
Wait a sec. Rather than a revised list, I think that's too general. Can we say, when you talk about EP Water, we'll have the opportunity to submit a revised list. Can we say EP Water will have the opportunity to identify, to remove projects no longer, to remove projects being addressed outside the flood planning, the RFPG process.
But aren't they given the opportunity to add the projects back in that were already removed because they're being studied outside the RFPG process?
I think that revised list is good. That way, because that's what we're going to be doing.
So I think, okay, all right, go ahead, undo all the changes. Leave it the way you had it originally.
Do we have a date that revised list needs to be in by?
I'm just putting before the next subcommittee 2 meeting, which we haven't talked about when that will be yet. That's the next agenda item, but yeah, right now, I guess we're just leaving it general.
Okay.
And Giselle, you're still in agreement with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and then in terms of, just to make sure, we already discussed the ranking of the City of El Paso Master Plan FMPs. And then what about the selection of the potentially feasible FMPs from the City of El Paso? Stormwater
Right,
Master.
So those are both included in this bullet here. So approval of the selection of the 25 is that first part, and then as well as all refinements to the screening process discussed during the subcommittee meeting held today. So I think one of those refinements was that I guess we're no longer going to be looking at community disruption for projects and coming up with scores for that. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So that's one of the refinements that we're talking about. And, you know, just generally cutting it down from the 96 projects to 25 and the refinements that went into the different steps that were sent in Jeff's spreadsheet. Those were the refinements as well. And then I guess we're saying that we want to evaluate all 25 that are remaining. However, AECOM will have to look at the remaining time and budget and see how many of those 25 we think we can evaluate. And that could potentially reduce the number of projects further. So that's the last portion there.
Okay, so then, and then in terms of reviewing El Paso County stormwater master plan FMPs, that was just that, it's just reviewed, or is it going to be taking some as well?
So this is worded similarly, that we're approving selecting the 19 FMPs that we winnowed down the total of 67 in the county plan down to 19. So we've selected those. That's the first part of this, and then similar to the El Paso City of El Paso one, we're saying that we approve all refinements to the screening process. So that's basically all the steps that that Jeff explained in through the spreadsheets, and it also includes removing that one project, the SOC 1 and 2, from the top of the list, which got us down from 20 to 19. So those would be the refinements that we're talking about. And then again, we're saying that El Paso County will have the opportunity to review and submit a revised list, mainly, you know, if he agrees with removing that SOC 1 and 2 from the top of the list. And then based on that, AECOM will see how many of these we think we can review or evaluate and potentially reduce the number further.
Okay, thank you. So that would take care of all the agenda items that were presented. And so
do we need a paragraph 4 in here to address the 9 other that are outside county and city?
That's covered in this first one here. So this is the approval of the refinement of screening process for the FMPs not included in the City of El Paso Stormwater Master Plan. As I should say, not included, or the El Paso County Stormwater Master Plan. So that's covered in this first bullet.
Okay. Does it also need the line that they'll be evaluated based on time budget to reduce the number of projects?
Yeah, that's probably a good comment, because that will affect those as well.
Yeah, let's add that part to that first one also. Of the 9, I think it's 9 instead of 19 projects.
Oh, right. Yeah, we can add the number 9 in there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, instead of 19, I think it should be 9. There you go. And it's currently 9. There's a potential for more, obviously.
Right. Yeah, and when we go to the open house, we haven't had the open house meetings for Pecos or Presidio yet, so that'll be another opportunity where we could pick up some additional projects that they could be telling us about. And there's some that are in the FME list and FMS list right now, because we just don't have the details of the project yet. But as we continue to coordinate, those details might become available, and it could shift some of those projects from the FME or FMS tables into the FMP table. So that could happen as well.
Yeah, you might also get something at Sol Ross too.
So
Sorry,
right there, we're saying how many of the 9 projects can be evaluated, but we're also considering maybe adding more we said, right? So if we just say, to me, that last sentence limits it to just the 9. So I think we need some type of wording saying that more can be added as, I don't know.
Well, you can say
Right.
other than El Paso, you can say other than El Paso City, County water projects or something there. Or regional projects.
You could say how many of the 9 currently identified projects plus plus other yet to be
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, projects.
And that's reasonable, I think. Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Okay.
We need a motion to accept that then?
So would it be possible then if you could make a motion to accept all 3 items as shown? And you can do it in one agenda item?
Sure. If is that fit your agenda?
I think so, because and then we won't take any action on the other, on 12.
Do we need Omar here for?
Omar's,
He's
he's
there.
physically out, he's
He's
made his way
located.
over there.
Oh, okay. I see him now. Okay, all right.
So let me
So-
ask you, the list, the revised list, do we just submit it to Annette and then she distributes it, or how do you want us to handle that? Or do we submit it to a ECOM and
I think it'd
copy
be good to
Annette?
sit AECom.
Okay, we'll do that.
Luis Alde.
Okay.
So if I could get a motion to approve the 3 bullet points on here.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion is approved.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. The next agenda item is tentative future meeting dates for this subcommittee. So I guess, Isela, I know that you will want some time to review these projects that we eliminated from the list. Was there a specific time frame that you think would be enough for you to review those? And I guess keeping in mind that the holidays are coming up here next week and next couple of weeks.
So when were we anticipating to have the next meeting, in a month or sooner than that? I'm looking at the
See, I was thinking potentially, depending on how this went, I guess if we had to squeeze in something, before the tech memo is due January 7th, then we, would need to be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But I don't think that we need to do that. I think what we've got here is sufficient for the level of detail we have in the tech memo. So I know that we have the FME FMS meeting is going to happen the week of the 10th through the 14th. That's subcommittee 3. So I was thinking, probably about a month's time frame. That week of the 17th through the 21st might be the best in between time period, considering the holidays.
Is that enough time for you to do what you need to do, Ducella?
Is it the 17th through the 21st of January?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah, that's more than enough time.
Okay.
Okay, and yeah, whenever you have that revised list, if you could just send that to us as early as you can, that would be ideal for us to help prepare for that next meeting.
Yeah, I plan on working on it over the weekend. And then I need to meet I'll meet next week internally. So I'll try to have it to you. Oh, Christmas already next week, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to make sure the county guy gets word that he has to do the same thing.
Right, we'll reach out to Gilbert Saldana and let him know that he's being asked to review that change.
Okay.
Do you want me to then I'll send out a doodle poll to check on availability between the 24th and 27th
Well,
of January?
I thought it was 1721.
Well, that's when she's going to review it.
No, I'm reviewing. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to have it to you guys soon. Yeah, like before the end of the year. But I mean, next week's already Christmas week, and then I guess between Christmas and New Year's, that's I don't know if everybody's gonna be working or not on that week.
No, I misunderstood. I'm sorry. I can send out the doodle poll between the 17th and 20th. Do you want to keep it in the afternoon or go for morning?
I think either would work on my schedule, unless anybody else has any restrictions.
The afternoon works better for me.
It's better for me too.
Yeah, I think the afternoon.
Okay.
So I'll send out the poll and it'll be for a 1 p.m. date. I mean, 1 p.m. start time.
You said 17 through 20?
Yeah, because I don't think we want to have a meeting on Friday or
Friday, good point.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
good point.
okay.
All righty. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Everybody. We know this was a long meeting, and we really appreciate all of your time and coordination in preparing for this. And I'll leave it at that, unless there's anything else anyone wants to add.
Are we going to have another long one Thursday?
I don't think it'll be this long, though.
Oh, I want to bet?
Annette, I won't be available on the 17th of January.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and put 18th through 20th then.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, we don't see it on the agenda, but we do. Can we just get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I'm not available on the 20th either.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Levi. Okay, Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is approved. Everyone have a good day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Can
Bye.
you send
Have a great day.
the agenda items?
I'm sorry?
Tell me the 3 revised
You know,
agenda items that you,
what? One of those dates is so
Yeah.
less, I think, isn't it?
can you email me that?
Yeah, I'll email you this right now.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
When is the Sol Ross meeting? Isn't that same week?
Ours